Welcome back to Podcast Answers, the show where I help you start and grow your podcast, helping other people along the way, answering any podcasting questions. That's right, I'm back. It feels like it's been quite a while since I've done this, mostly because I have. It's been a while. I've been out doing some other AV production stuff, and it's been amazing. But here we go, another Podcast Answers. Today, we are going to be talking about how to eliminate filler words in your public speaking, on your podcast, all of that good jazz. So how you guys been, man? What have you been doing in producing podcasts? So hopefully you've been off to a good start and you've been able to get out there and produce some really good podcast episodes. For me, like I said, I've been doing lots of other production things, producing conferences and things like that. So it's been good, but I've not been away. I've not been at my studio, so I've not been able to actually do a show. So with that, though, I'm back. We're here. It seems like I'm saying that a lot, but it is. Anyway, I wanted to welcome you guys back. So filler words are something like and and like and and so. They are the things that you input into your show, into your podcast, into your public speaking when you don't really know what to say, when you don't really have the words there, when you need some sort of a crutch to lean on. That's what filler words are. And that means that you sound like you don't know what you're talking about. When you have a lot of words in there, it doesn't sound very professional. So what are some ways that we can eliminate filler words in our podcasting, in our public speaking, and things like that? So what I would say, the very, very first thing that I would say is just become aware of the filler words that you use. Not everyone uses the same one. Not everyone says like, people use different filler words for different things. And so you need to really become aware of what your filler word is, your crutch is. So you can do that a couple different ways. You can record yourself speaking and identify the most common words like, like, So for me, what that means is almost every time I release a podcast episode, I listen to it. I also listen to it while I'm editing, when I'm editing podcasts and things like that. I personally, my workflow for podcasting is a little bit different than others. I don't do a whole lot of editing. So, and I just caught myself saying, I don't do a whole lot of editing in my podcast episodes. And so what I do is I listen back as I've already published it. And so I become aware of the words that I'm using, because once you listen to yourself, usually when you're recording, you don't realize that what words you're using are. And that's because a lot of times you're just concentrating on speaking and what you're trying to say and things like that. And so you don't really have a good sense of the filler words that you're actually using. So one suggestion that I say would be to listen back to your podcast recording, either while you're editing or afterwards once you publish it. And again, for me, I don't do a whole lot of editing, so I don't actually listen back to it. Now, some filler words are good. No one speaks without any filler words. And so if you are going to edit things out, don't cut all of them out. But at the same time, when you're editing, like, you leave some in there, because this if you practice these things, this will help your editing cut down tremendously, because you won't need to be cutting in and out every one of those single little slices for your podcast. So another thing you can do is practice pausing too. Replace your filler words with intentional silence. Pauses feel longer to you than your audience. Let me say that again. Practice pausing. Replace your filler words with intentional silence. Pauses feel longer to you than to your audience. Now, when I said that felt like it was incredibly long. But it wasn't. It really wasn't that long that I wasn't talking. So practice pausing. Replace your filler words with intentional silence. One of the things that I like to do is, if I know that my filler words are specific things like what I do is I put a sticky note right up by my camera. So I see that word. I see that word all the time. I see it coming in. I see it there. and I'm more aware of what I'm saying because I know that that's my filler word. So if it's on a sticky note, I'm going to be less likely to say it. Now, another thing that you can do is slow your speaking down. Speaking too quickly often triggers filler words because your brain doesn't have time to keep up and figure out what you're going to say next. Take time to think before you're speaking. Slow down. And again, the same thing happens. The same rule applies with the last point about the intentional pauses. When you slow down, it's going to sound incredibly slow to you. It is going to sound incredibly slow to you. But it's really not that slow because your audience doesn't know what you're going to say, what you're thinking. And so it does take them some more time to process the words that you're saying. So be intentional, slow down, and use pauses. Another thing that I would say is prepare your key points. Know your main message well. If you're going to be speaking off the cuff, a lot of times that's going to cause more filler words because you don't actually know what your thought is, what your points are. You're kind of coming up with them off the cuff. Know your main points well. And if you have to write them down, that's great. That's fine. A lot of times when I'm speaking, and I'm doing it right now, I have a teleprompter in front of me and I have my actual main points that I want to talk. Now, I don't, not word for word. I'm not going to use word for word on my teleprompter because that makes it less genuine. But what I do is I have my key points up there. And so I know where I'm going. I kind of know what I'm going to be talking about. And I can just look at those key points and I say, okay, know your main topic well. That's something that I can talk about without actually having to think about, okay, what am I going to be talking about next? So, the next thing you want to do is practice your transition between points too. So if you have lots of points in your show, lots of points in your podcast episode, you may want to practice those transitions between topics, and because that way you're going to be able to transition between topic to topic without actually stuttering and stammering and trying to figure out what you're actually wanting to say. And the next thing is have examples ready. So, for instance, if I'm talking about this and I'm going to be making a point about slowing down or a story that I talked about, let's say I wanted to talk about a story that where I didn't know my topic well, I would want to know that story that I'm going to be using. Know your example as well. That way you don't have to be trying to come up with them on the fly. You don't have to be thinking about, okay, what am I going to be saying? What am I going to be doing? What am I going to be talking about? All of those things like that. And so prepare ahead of time for the podcast episode that you're going to be talking about. The next thing is the power of three. Structure your thoughts in groups of three to stay organized and reduce mental scrambling. So if you're talking about a group of something, make sure that you're doing that in three. Like maybe do 3 points and then an example. Threes are great for public speaking. If you're a churchgoer, a lot of times your pastors have 3 points to their sermon because threes work really well. Also, practice out loud. Rehearse your presentations multiple times, focusing on smooth delivery without fillers. This does become easier as you go longer in your podcasting journey. I was terrible at it for the first long time that I did podcasting. And what helped me actually was having a co-host. But now for this podcast, I don't have a co-host. So practice out loud, rehearse your presentations multiple times, focusing on smooth delivery without fillers. Again, this may be just without recording, because a lot of times when you press record and that red light comes on your recorder, red light, it may not be red, but whatever. The red light on your recorder, your camera, your whatever comes on, your body kind of freaks out and goes, I'm being recorded. So you can actually change that. So one of the things that I do, and this is a whole side note, but when I'm recording a video, I usually, like for external people, not myself, but what I do is I turn the red light off on my camera. A lot of video cameras, you can turn that off, that tally light, that on light, because I find that people freak out when the red light shows up. They know that they're being recorded and they can't talk about what they wanted to talk about. But if you turn that red light off and you just start rolling, lots of times it just comes out okay. And you can even turn your recorder on way beforehand. And then, but once you're getting into the conversation, you can say, "Hey, we've been recording actually, so you're okay. You're not going to die being on camera." So practice out loud. Rehearse your presentations. Turn your red lights off. Don't look at the red lights. Don't record it as you're rehearsing. Just do it. This does become less the longer you get into podcasting, the less you actually have to practice out loud. And the last thing I would say is get feedback from trusted colleagues, your family, your friends, to point out when you use filler words during practice sessions. So that maybe when you're practicing out loud, get somebody to sit in the room with you. Get somebody to sit in the room and they'll be able to tell you, okay, hey, I see that you're having this word that you're using. I'm seeing that you are using the word quite a bit. I see that you're using ah. What can you replace that with? They can remind you, hey, slow down, use spaces, use pauses. In fact, the idea of a pause usually is used to drive a point home. And really, it does not as long as it feels to you. So those are the things that I would say that you can use to get rid of your ums, your ahs, your filler words. How do you do it? Let me know. Let me know in the comments for this episode. Let me know how do you get rid of your filler words that you use in your presentations and in your podcast. Guys, if you've enjoyed this podcast, I would encourage you to go over to podcastanswers.com/buymeacoffee and give us a few dollars. Give me a few dollars. Shoot out your thanks to me with a message and a couple bucks. Whatever you feel this podcast was worth, I just ask that you give that back. If you've gotten any value from this, go ahead and give it back, and we can, thank you. It helps me encourage me to keep going on this podcast. If you have any questions that you would like answered on this podcast, go over to podcastanswers.com/ask. Ask away. I love to answer podcast questions. With that, have a great week and keep podcasting.